Get off this property right now, or I will put every single one of you in handcuffs and take you to jail." The officer stood on the front porch of a two-story brick house on Maple Ridge Drive in a quiet Georgia town. His hand rested on the top of his belt near his holster. He did not blink. He stared down at a woman who held a set of house keys in her right hand and a folder of papers in her left. Her name was Denise Carter. She was 41 years old. She wore a simple gray sweatshirt and blue jeans with white sneakers. Her two children stood behind her on the walkway. Her son George was 17. Her daughter Aaliyah was 12. George held two large boxes stacked on top of each other. Aaliyah held a backpack in one hand and a small dog on a leash in the other. A second police cruiser pulled up to the curb. The lights were flashing, but the siren was off. A neighbor stood across the street with a phone pressed to her ear. She was the one who made the call. She watched everything from behind a row of hedges. Another neighbor came out of his front door and stood on his lawn with his arms crossed. The first officer's name tag read Lion. He was tall with a thick neck and a buzz cut. He looked at Denise like she was a stranger standing in someone else's yard. But she was not a stranger. She had bought this house 11 months ago. The deed was in her name. The mortgage was in her name. The mailbox had her name on it. "Sir, I own this house," Denise said. She held up the folder. "I have every document right here if you want to see them." Officer Lyon did not look at the folder. He looked past her at George. George was tall for his age and wore a black hoodie. "Who is that?" Lyon asked. He pointed at George like he was pointing at a suspect in a lineup across the room. "That is my son," Denise said. "He lives here with me, and so does my daughter, who is standing right next to him." Lyon shook his head slowly. He pressed the button on his shoulder radio and spoke into it. He said he had 3 individuals claiming to be residents at the address, and that the caller reported a possible break-in in progress at the location. Denise took one step forward. Lyon raised his hand like a crossing guard stopping traffic at a busy school intersection ahead of them. "Ma'am, do not come any closer to me right now," he said. His voice was flat, but his eyes were sharp and alert. The second officer walked up the driveway. Her name tag read Tanner. She was younger and shorter with her hair pulled back tight. She looked at Denise, and then looked at the children, and then looked back at Lyon for some direction on the situation. "She says she owns the place," Lyon told Tanner. "I want to verify that before anyone goes inside this house right now, if that works." "I have the deed right here," Denise said again. She held the folder out further toward both of them with a steady and calm hand. Tanner reached for it. Lyon blocked her arm with the back of his hand and shook his head at her without saying a word. "We will verify it ourselves through the system," Lyon said. "Put the folder down and step off the porch now, please." Denise looked at him for a long moment. She looked at her children. George had not said one word the entire time since the cruisers arrived. His jaw was tight. His eyes were locked on Lyon. Aaliyah was squeezing the dog's leash so hard her small knuckles were turning white from the pressure. Denise stepped off the porch. She walked back to the sidewalk where her children were standing, and she put her hand on George's arm. "Don't say anything," she whispered to him. "Not one word right now, baby, okay? Not a single word." George nodded. He set the boxes down on the ground beside him carefully so nothing inside would break or get damaged. Lyon went back to his cruiser. He sat inside for a long time. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Tanner stayed near the front porch and did not talk to the family. She looked at her own shoes and then looked at the sky and then looked at her phone. She never looked at Denise. The neighbor across the street was still watching. She had ended her phone call, but she still stood behind the hedges like a guard. She wore a pink bathrobe and slippers and had curlers in her gray hair. Her name was Linda Marsh. She had lived on Maple Ridge Drive for 22 years. She had never spoken one word to Denise in the 11 months since Denise moved into the house. A third car pulled up. It was not a cruiser. It was a dark blue sedan with tinted windows that parked 3 houses down from the scene. Nobody got out of it. Nobody seemed to notice it had arrived at all. But it was there. Lyon finally got out of his cruiser and walked back up the driveway toward the family. He had a look on his face like he had eaten something sour but had to keep chewing it anyway. He stopped in front of Denise. "The house is registered in your name," he said. He said it like he was admitting he lost a bet with an old friend. "I know," Denise said. "I told you that already when you first arrived here at my house." "Well, the call came in as a possible break-in, and we are required to respond to every call we get," Lyon said flatly. "I was using my key," Denise said. She held up the key ring and jangled it so both officers could hear the sound. "Who breaks into a house with a key and 2 children, and a dog and moving boxes?" Lyon did not answer. He turned to Tanner and gave her a short nod toward the cruisers as a signal to leave. "Ma'am, just try to make sure the neighbors know you live here," Lyon said over his shoulder as he walked away from them. Denise watched them go. She did not blink. She did not yell. She held her folder against her chest and breathed slowly in and out. "Mom," George said. It was the first word he had spoken since they pulled up to the house 30 minutes earlier. "I know," Denise said quietly. "Let's go inside our house now." They walked up the porch steps together. Denise put the key in the lock and turned it. The door opened into a wide hallway with hardwood floors and white walls, and sunlight pouring through tall windows on both sides. They stepped inside. Aaliyah let the dog off the leash and it ran straight to the back of the house. George set his boxes on the floor in the living room. He looked at his mother. His eyes were wet but nothing fell from them. "She called the police on us for moving into our own house," he said. He said it like he was reading a fact from a textbook. "Yes, she did," Denise said. She put the folder on the kitchen counter and opened it. She pulled out the deed and set it flat on the surface. She looked at it for a few seconds. Then she pulled out a second document from underneath the deed. It was a business card clipped to a letter. The letterhead said Office of the District Attorney, Fulton County. The name on the card was her own, Denise M. Carter, Assistant District Attorney. She had not told the officers who she was. She had not pulled rank or threatened their jobs or said a single word about her career. She had stood on her own porch with a folder and a set of keys and let them treat her the way they treated her. But now she was inside, and the folder was open, and the clock was running on something much bigger than the officers could imagine. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Someone answered on the second ring. "It happened exactly how we said it would," Denise said into the phone. "Get the camera footage from the doorbell and call Judge Walker first thing tomorrow." She hung up. She looked at George. He was staring at her with wide eyes and a half-open mouth like he had just seen something new. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing right now?" "My job," she said. She pulled a laptop out of one of the boxes George carried in and set it on the counter next to the deed and documents. She opened it and typed in her password. A case file filled the entire screen. The title at the top read, "Investigation into Discriminatory Policing Practices, Oakwood County Sheriff Department." The file was 312 pages long. It had been active for 14 months. Denise had not bought this house by accident. She had not moved to this neighborhood by chance or for the good school district. She had been placed here. The entire move was part of a federal civil rights investigation that she had been running since she was appointed to a joint task force. The Oakwood County Sheriff Department had 67 complaints filed against it in 3 years. All 67 were from black residents. All 67 involved false trespassing calls, unlawful stops, or illegal searches at their own homes in their own neighborhoods on their own property. Nobody had been able to prove a pattern because nobody had the right evidence from the inside with their own experience. Denise volunteered. She moved her family into the target neighborhood. She installed hidden cameras on every corner of the property before moving day. She registered the deed under her full legal name with no shields or covers or fake identities. Then she waited. She waited for someone to call the police on her. She waited for the police to show up and do exactly what 67 other families said they did to them. Over and over again. Today was the day, and every second of it was on camera. George sat down on the living room floor next to his boxes. Aaliyah came back from the hallway with dog trotting beside her on the hardwood floor. "Is Mom in trouble?" Aaliyah asked her brother quietly, so their mother could not hear from the kitchen. "No," George said. He looked toward the kitchenware. Denise was typing fast on her laptop with her phone next to her. "I think Mom is the trouble." The dark blue sedan that had parked 3 houses down was still sitting at the curb outside. A man inside the sedan wrote something on a notepad. He wore a plain black suit. His badge was clipped to his belt. He worked for the Department of Justice. He had watched the entire encounter from start to finish. His report would go directly to the federal judge overseeing the case. Night fell on Maple Ridge Drive. The streetlights turned on one by one down the block like a row of candles. Linda Marsh's house across the street went dark early. She pulled her curtains shut and turned off her porch light like she wanted to disappear. Denise sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, and 3 phones lined up next to it like soldiers standing in a row. She had been on calls for 4 straight hours. Every conversation was short. Every word was careful and precise and measured like she was building something out of bricks one at a time. At 9 that night, she closed the laptop and walked into the living room where George and Aaliyah had made a small camp on the floor. They had sleeping bags and pillows and a portable speaker playing soft music. The dog was asleep between them, curled into a ball. Denise sat down on the floor next to them. She crossed her legs and leaned back against the wall beneath the window. "I need to tell you both something important about why we moved here," she said. George looked at her. He had been waiting for this conversation for a long time. He could feel it coming for weeks now. "I already know it's not just about the house," he said. "You've been carrying that folder everywhere we go like it was made of gold." Denise nodded. "You're right. This house is part of my work. I moved us here because this neighborhood has a big problem with how police treat people." Aaliyah looked up from her sleeping bag. "Is that why that lady called the cops on us today for going into our own house?" "Yes," Denise said. "And she is not the first person on this street to do that to a black family moving in here." "How many times has it happened before us?" George asked. He sat up straighter and pulled his hoodie off over his head like he was getting ready to listen. 67 families filed complaints in the last 3 years, Denise said. Every single one of them was black. Every single time, the police showed up and treated them like criminals on their own property. Aaliyah hugged the sleeping dog tighter. "That's a lot of families, Mom. That's like more than my whole class at school times, too." "I know, baby," Denise said. "And nobody could stop it because nobody had enough proof from the inside to show a judge." "So you became the proof," George said. He said it slowly like he was putting together the last piece of a puzzle on the table. "We became the proof," Denise said. "The cameras caught everything today. The officer refusing to look at my documents and papers. The officer telling me to step off my own porch. The neighbor watching and never once coming over to ask a simple question." George was quiet for a moment. He looked down at his hands and then back at his mother with clear and steady eyes. "That's why you told me not to talk," he said. "You didn't want me to give them a reason to say anything happened." "That's exactly right," Denise said. "I needed the video to show them doing everything wrong, while we did everything right the entire time." Next morning, Denise was up before the sun came through the windows. She wore a black suit and low heels, and her hair was pulled back tight. She looked like a different person from the woman in the gray sweatshirt on the porch the day before yesterday. She drove downtown to the Fulton County Courthouse. She carried a thick black briefcase in one hand and her phone in the other hand. She walked through the metal detectors and took the elevator to the 4th floor. She stepped into a conference room where 6 people were already sitting at a long wooden table. One of them was Judge Patricia Walker. She sat at the head of the table with reading glasses and a pen. Next to her was a man from the Department of Justice. It was the same man from the dark blue sedan on Maple Ridge Drive. "Good morning," Denise said. She set her briefcase on the table and opened it. She pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table toward the judge. "This is the doorbell camera footage from yesterday at my home," Denise said. "It shows 2 officers responding to a false trespassing call against my family and me, at a home I legally own. Judge Walker picked up the flash drive and handed it to a clerk sitting behind her against the wall of the room. "This is on top of the 67 complaints already in the file?" the judge asked. "Yes, ma'am," Denise said. "But this time we have the video. We have audio. We have the officer refusing to look at my deed of ownership. And we have the DOJ Observer's independent report from the scene confirming every detail I am telling you right now." The man from the sedan nodded. He opened his own folder and slid a typed report across the table toward the judge as well. "I watched the entire encounter from arrival to departure," he said. "The officers did not examine the homeowner's documents at any point during the stop. They treated the family as suspects for the entire duration of their time at the property." Judge Walker read the report for 3 full minutes without saying a word. The room was completely silent. Denise stood still with her hands folded in front of her at the edge of the table. "I am authorizing the formal investigation," Judge Walker said. She took off her glasses and looked directly at Denise across the room. "This goes to a grand jury." Denise nodded once. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She closed her briefcase and picked it up from the table. News broke 3 days later. A local reporter got a tip from someone inside the courthouse and ran the story on the front page. The headline read, "Assistant DA goes undercover in her own neighborhood to expose police bias against black homeowners in Oakwood County." By that afternoon, the story was on every major news channel in the state. By that evening, it had gone across the entire country. Denise's face was on screens from Atlanta to Los Angeles to New York, and everywhere in between around the nation. Officer Lyon saw the story on the television in the break room at the station. He was eating a sandwich when his own face appeared on the screen from the doorbell camera footage. He put the sandwich down. He did not pick it back up again. Officer Tanner saw it on her phone while sitting in her cruiser during a traffic stop on the highway. She pulled over to the shoulder and watched the full clip twice. She called her union representative before she called anyone else. Linda Marsh saw it on the 6 o'clock news while sitting in her living room across the street from Denise's house. She closed her curtains again. This time she also locked her front door and turned off every light in the whole house. The grand jury convened 2 weeks later. Denise was the lead witness. She sat in the witness chair in her black suit and spoke clearly and slowly into a microphone for 3.5 hours. She walked the jury through every detail of the case. She explained the 67 complaints. She showed the pattern. She played the video from her doorbell camera on a big screen for the whole jury to see. She played the audio of Lyon threatening her with handcuffs on her own front porch at her own home. Then she called other witnesses. One by one, families from the neighborhood walked into the courtroom and told their stories to the jury. A man named David Brooks said officers pulled him out of his car in his own driveway and searched him for 20 minutes. A woman named Tamika Reed said police entered her home without a warrant and told her she matched the description of someone else. A couple named the Washingtons said they were detained on their front lawn for 45 minutes, while officers called their landlord who confirmed they had lived there for 6 long years. The testimony went on for 4 days. 31 witnesses took the stand. The jury heard every word and saw every piece of evidence. On the 5th day, the grand jury returned its decision. They issued indictments against 12 officers in the Oakwood County Sheriff Department. The charges included civil rights violations and abuse of power and filing false reports and unlawful detentions against residents. Officer Lyon was one of the 12. He was suspended without pay and ordered to surrender his badge and weapon by the end of the day on Friday. The sheriff of Oakwood County held a press conference. He stood behind a podium with sweat on his forehead and cameras flashing in his face. He said he was deeply troubled by the allegations and that he would cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation into his department. A reporter in the front row raised her hand and asked him one question that cut through the room like a knife through warm butter. "Sheriff, did you know that 67 black families filed complaints against your department in 3 years, And did you do anything about any of them? The sheriff opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He gripped the sides of the podium with both hands. His press secretary stepped in and ended the conference. Back on Maple Ridge Drive, Denise was sitting on her front porch in a rocking chair. She wore her gray sweatshirt and jeans again. Aaliyah was drawing pictures on the porch with colored chalk. George was shooting a basketball at a hoop he had put up over the garage door that morning. A car pulled up to the curb. A woman got out. She was tall and wore a nice blue dress and carried a plate covered in foil. She walked up the driveway and stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Hi," the woman said. "My name is Karen. I live 4 houses down from you on this street. I brought you a cake." Denise looked at her. "Thank you, Karen. That is very kind of you to bring that over here." Karen set the plate on the bottom step. She looked like she wanted to say more, but did not know how to start or where to begin. "I saw what happened to you on the news," Karen said. "I've lived here for 9 years, and I never said anything about what I saw happen to other families." "I know," Denise said quietly from the rocking chair. "I should have," Karen said. Her voice cracked like a stick snapping under a heavy foot on a dry trail. "I should have said something a long time ago." Denise looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly and pointed to the empty rocking chair next to her on the porch. "Sit down, Karen," Denise said. "Let's talk about what happens next for this neighborhood going forward." Karen walked up the steps and sat down. Aaliyah looked up from her chalk drawing and waved at her with a small hand. Karen waved back. Across the street, Linda Marsh's house was still dark with the curtains closed tight, but there was a small gap in the curtain on the second floor. A shadow moved behind it and then disappeared back into the dark room. George bounced the basketball twice on the driveway. He looked at the hoop. He looked at his mother on the porch talking to the neighbor in the rocking chairs. He looked at his little sister drawing with chalk on the concrete steps. He took the shot. The ball went through the hoop clean with nothing but net. It bounced back to him on the driveway. He caught it with both hands and held it against his chest for a moment. Then he turned and looked at the house. His mother's house. Their house that nobody could take from them no matter who called the police. He bounced the ball again and took another shot. Clean again, nothing but net. The sound echoed down the quiet street. As the afternoon sun moved slowly across the rooftops of Maple Ridge Drive, and the rocking chairs creaked back and forth. On the front porch of the house that belonged to the Carter family. Inside the house, on the kitchen counter, the deed still sat right where Denise had left it the day before. The name was printed clearly. At the top of the page in black ink, Denise M. Carter, owner, and next to the deed sat her business card, Assistant District Attorney, Fulton County, the same name, the same woman, the one who stood on her porch with a folder and a set of keys, and said 5 simple words that started everything. "Sir, I own this house.